we'll have it adopted, but I hope.
Let's call the meeting to order. We're all present. George will be absent this evening. Item 2, conduct a public hearing on the proposed 2017-2018 City of Enid budget and related authorities financial plan. Aaron, you need me to read item 3 first?
No, this is the public hearing. If there's anyone who signed up to speak, this is their opportunity to speak regarding the budget.
Okay. I don't have the sign-up sheet. Thank you. We have one, but it's later on in the agenda. Item 3, discuss and take necessary action on the fiscal year 2018-2019 City of Enid budget.
We're on to item 3.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
She signed up for a later item.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Again, tonight, the topics that we plan to cover are airport, the Enid Event Center Fund, police, fire, and then wrap up with Enid Economic Development Authority. Those are the funds we have not covered yet. There are also placeholders on the agenda for EMA and EPTA, even though we've already spoken about them, in case there's any action you would like to take regarding those budgets as well tonight. Since the meeting last week, there's been some proposed changes to the budget since it was originally sent out to you on April the 27th. One of the things in the meeting last week that we talked about is trying to get some money towards getting a solution for the maintenance building at the golf maintenance shop. And so we've come back and looked through all of the revenues and expenditures that are in there and try and identify if there's anything else that we could add. And in doing that, we came across the #1 Woodlands property that we just purchased a couple of months ago, or within the last couple of months. And we decided we could add revenue in for the sale of that property, which would give us, we're anticipating approximately $200,000. As a result of that, there would be $160 available for us to transfer out to the golf fund. There was also a desire to go ahead and balance the Advanced Development Authority budget. Right now, it's a $6,100 deficit budget. And just to go ahead and balance that so that we don't have that continuing going forward, transferring the other $6,100 there. The other increase of $33,900 in general fund, there was a desire to get some seasonal groundskeepers in the street and stormwater department so that we could keep our guys, instead of mowing this summer, keep them striping the streets and patching and cleaning out those ditches. And so that would be the cost to add 4 additional positions for the 4-month season to get the mowing done there. So those are the proposed changes that would affect the general fund and transfers out there. And then we do have one proposed change for the Enid Public Transportation Authority. We did receive 2 letters from ODOT this last week, one for the 5311 grant and one for the 5339. The 5311 is the normal funding transfer from the state to the transit for their operations. The amount that we're going to be getting from them is a little bit higher than what we had anticipated when we received that allocation letter. And then we also did go ahead and get a 5339 approval if we want to accept that, and that would be for buses again. They anticipated the match would be approximately $17,000 to be able to purchase 2 buses. So we would like to go ahead and increase their budget to show that additional grant revenue we're receiving, and have the $17,000 in expense to do a grant match for buses for them in the next federal fiscal year, which starts in October. So it would need to be in this budget. So these are the proposed changes we have from the original document you have, and if those were to flow through, I've updated on this slide all the numbers that would change. On page 10 of the budget summary, there'd be an increase in the revenue and expense of $200,000 in general fund. Golf, 160 increase in the revenue and expenditures. Just an increase in VDA of 6,100 to the revenue, which would give us the same ending balance as beginning balance to balance that budget. And then adding 17,000 in the revenue and expenditures. Overall, it gives us an increase of 383,100 in revenues, 377 in expenses, and overall projected ending fund balance of 6,100 higher for the year. So that's how those numbers would look if all of those were pushed through to the budget places where they have to be. Any questions on any of those changes that we're proposing?
Aaron, not on those changes specifically, but in reviewing the budget, I noticed that last year we spent quite a bit of time discussing the golf course and the operation of the golf course. And my recollection is we hired a consultant who came and made a number of recommendations to us about how we should operate the course, and that we put those recommendations into practice. I guess my question is, did we get the outcome that we were looking for? It seems to me that in the past we've had to supplement the golf course in some amount less than $200,000, and this year it was more than that. So I was just curious as to how the new golf course practices are, if they're going to get the results that we were looking for, or if we're still going to be about where we always were in the past.
Well, that's a very good question, Commissioner. We did discuss this a little bit, was it last time? But we did have a golf consultant come in. We pretty much implemented everything, virtually everything he recommended, which were rate increases, any other changes to operations, taking over the driving range, pro shop, and driving range, pro shop, and snack bar. The short answer is it has not worked out the way that the consultant laid it out at this point. We are about a year into, we've got about, 15 months worth of data?
Yes.
So we're about to complete our first fiscal year with the new operations of having all those things. I think Aaron talked about last time that I'm just looking at the revenues from the sheet. Our expenditures for the next year certainly have gone up to, I think she explained last time, had a lot to do with personnel changes and buyouts for retiring employees. Short answer is no, we haven't seen a financial improvement that would allow us to keep the reduced transfer that we had this current year of 154,000 or 157,000, so we've increased it to 300. I don't know if it was at 300 before, but it was at about 250.
It's been 250 for several years, in that range.
I have seen enough. There's probably some more refinements we can look at. The bottom line is it's always going to take a certain amount of money. I don't know what a fair amount of money is, but it's going to take a certain amount to run a golf course.
Yeah, well, I guess the only reason I brought it up is that we've been operating in a certain way for probably 40, 50 years, and we changed it in hopes of making a change, and maybe we'd be better go back to operating the way we did before.
Well, certainly we'll look at everything. The snack bar, while it does make money, it is difficult to staff, and that is an issue that we have seen. The pro shop, Michael, when he was here last time, mentioned that pro shop sales, I think he mentioned they were down somewhat. We're still making money. He's looking at different merchandise. He talked about adding some ladies' apparel in there in an effort to try and focus on things that are moving and that might add to the bottom line. The driving range we had increased to, I think, $4, or was it $3 per bucket of balls. We did not, I think we came in around 22,000 instead of, the budgeted number, 22,000 instead of 30. We're budgeting off what we're really thinking is going to happen this year. So we're actually thinking in some areas maybe we might have raised rates too much. Anyway, but you're right.
Well, I'm not, certainly not advocating that we give up the golf course, but I just think that if you make some changes and they don't work, maybe you shouldn't have made the changes.
I think you need another year of experience at least. That give you two.
We'll see how it works out.
I agree.
I thought, I might be making this up, but I thought when we talked about this the other day that there was some explanation about that being higher because there was like a one-time, like something was different this year than before that was an expense.
There are a couple things that are in there that are a little bit higher. There's a capital for $15,000 for a sand top dresser, which normally they don't buy equipment outright, they lease, but with the dollar threshold of that, that's causing it to raise a little bit. And then there also are 2 anticipated retirements for employees that have a little bit of tenure. So there's some payout there that we don't anticipate continuing on. So there is a little. The other thing that's kind of coupled and made this have to be where we're fully funding it is that they do not have a fund balance to draw from. So in some of those years where it was 250, they may have had a small fund balance to be able to draw down to make it work. And they're not in a position where they have fund balance any longer to draw down. And so it's going to have to be fully supplemented if we want to run a golf course.
I think it was a pension retirement fund, too, Tammy.
I think we need more, Dad. I think we need another summer of seeing what happens. And he said that membership was getting ready to start up, right?
He did say membership was up. I think he said we're up to 91 members, I think. I don't recall what.
He said like June is probably, the membership rolls over or starts over in June or July.
It also seems like anytime we make a change, any program, that it takes people a couple years to, I mean, when we changed public transportation, 3 times in 8 years, every time, yeah, and it's just now that we have, we only switched back to the system we're in, 4 years ago, and we're finally, with public transit, finally kind of up and rolling where we want to be. I think it just takes time when you make a switch over. I bet that we're going to be doing better on the golf course in another year or 2.
See?
I will say it's also, it is interesting, we pay consultants to tell us a lot of things around here. And we rely on their expertise. Sometimes we value their expertise even more, maybe than our own intuition and what our own people may be telling us. And the truth is, it does not always work out the way that they, I think about that sometimes as we pay them and they ride off into the sunset, and I still have problems here. So, anyway.
It's a check and balance, and usually we do the right thing. That's what's disgusting.
Well, and the longer we work on the golf course facilities and they get better, that's gonna help things too. When they have the clubhouses done and all those things that they talked about.
Anything else?
Not about golf. He doesn't golf. Tired of talking about golf. It's all we ever talk about.
Aaron?
Are you ready to move on? All right, we're going to talk about airport, and actually Dan Onisforge is going to come up and give you an update on the airport budget, and it's on page 90.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager. Our budget is very similar to what it's been in the past. If you recall, we are an enterprise fund. We have to balance our revenue and our expenses, and as you can see, the balance comes true again this year. Expenses are main revenue pieces, if you will, fuel, hangars, leasing hangars and leasing land. We do sell some other things like charts and some oil and things like that, but our principal revenue source is the fuel and the hangars. And again, on the other side, our expenses are also for fuel. We got to buy the fuel to sell it. We also use some of that fuel for ourselves, gasoline and diesel. And we purchase all sorts of things that you can imagine, parts for repairs for the equipment we use, for the hangars that we have, insurance, travel, vehicle maintenance, office supplies. It runs the entire gamut, as you can imagine. We have 3 big projects, 3 projects this year. The first one, we intend to paint a couple of rows of hangars. Those of you that have been out there recently, there's 2 hangar rows that are galvanized steel, a little bit of rust on them. They're probably the oldest ones out there. We want to try to standardize some of the colors out there, paint them tan. And we've got preliminary estimates on that, and I expect to do that sometime this summer. Another purchase that we intend to make, if we have the money at the end of the year, is a mule, a 4x4 all-terrain vehicle. We need something like that to get around sometimes out along the perimeter road and that sort of thing. And then I'm sure on the back of your mind is the terminal. The bids came in the other day. They're still high. We have asked the engineer to hire a third party to take a look at the estimates and give us a better feel from a third-party point of view, someone who hasn't looked at this before, and give us an idea really where the price should be. When we get that, we will huddle, Gerald and I, Aaron, and come up with a plan, and we'll bring that to you. Are there any questions on our budget? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to the Enid Event Center Fund now. It's on page 132. There are two main components that make up the Enid Event Center Fund. There is the hotel tax, and then there's the Spectra contract, which includes managing the Event Center and Convention Hall, and they also oversee and manage the Visit Enid, sorry, excuse me. This year, you can see our revenue is projecting to come in a little bit lower. We're projecting to come in $91,000 less than what was budgeted in revenue for hotel tax for the year. So we did adjust those revenues down for hotel tax for next year. The revenue for the event center is projected to be up, so that's why overall you see an increase, but the net of the two is the increase that you see there. Contractual services are about even. They go down a little bit based on the fact that when hotel tax goes down, the amount that we have to pay out in professional services to the county is in proportion to that. So the 3% of that tax that gets passed along to them reduces with that revenue reduction. And then maintenance and operations, we have a slight increase, and that again is for operations from Spectra. And then capital outlay, we have a slight increase, again, as we have that facility over there aging a little bit. There's some repairs that need to be done with some carpet in the grand ballroom, some curbs and that are broken off in the parking lot, and other items there that just need general repairs. And so we have included dollars to be able to do that. Kind of this next slide is a breakdown of kind of how it works. And so the hotel tax comes into the fund, and from that we're required to pay the 3% to the county, which leaves the remaining hotel tax of 5% for us to work with to pay things out of this fund. Overall, you can see we're projecting a $60,000 decrease in hotel tax for the year, which has a reduction in expenditures out of 22.5, so we have 37.5 less in revenue to work with in the fund. Interest, Visit Enid, insurance, Spectra, contract incentive are all the same year over year from the current year we're in to next year. We do have a slight increase in capital items to get some of those repairs done. And what you can see is that leaves us, whenever we take out all those expenditures, $155,342 left as hotel tax. We need a supplement of $325,000 from the municipal authority to get up to the $480,000 deficit that Spectra is anticipating to have as a deficit, which you can see has improved from their deficit this year where they're budgeted at $535. Now they are projecting to come in better than that. And Kevin Brisky is here from Spectra to go over his piece of that and how their budget was put together, and answer questions also on the Visit Enid piece of that.
Thank you, Commissioners, Mayor, City Manager. Appreciate you letting me present this today. So just to go through our budget here, first just a little bit about Spectra. For those who don't know, we're hired to manage the facility here, the Convention Hall, the Event Center, all of the Central National Bank Center, and work with and oversee Visit Enid as well. And, we manage over 125 facilities throughout the country here, with the CNB Center being one of them. Just a brief overview of what we'll talk about today. So FY18, this is where we project, as Aaron had mentioned, our original budget was a $535,000 deficit, and it looks like we are going to beat that by about $45,000. Events are up from last year, which is part of it, so therefore operating income is up as well, and our expenses are only up slightly, but fairly consistent to what they were last year, and other income the same is fairly consistent to last year, so that's where we're getting the better net operating income of the 490. Kind of look at how we get the event mix. This is on the convention hall side. A lot of it is made up of meetings and banquets. Those are our two strongest pieces of that side of it. And then on the event center side, sporting events are a big part of where we get the event mix from. And then we also have the concerts. Also in there is the community events and the consumer shows as well is the biggest part of making up that event center side mix. So looking at the financial details for FY19, so our direct event revenue and ancillary revenue are projected to be up fairly significantly this upcoming year, and event operating income along with that will go up with more stuff we do. There are some additional operating expenses, but overall the net event operating income is projected to be higher next year. Other income is going to be pretty steady from where we are this past year, leaving our net operating income up. And then our indirect expenses are projected to be up a little bit as well. And the proposed subsidy is projected to be $480,000, which is $10,000 less than what we need this current fiscal year. As you could take a look, since we started managing the two facilities, or since both facilities have opened, between FY13 and 14 is when the event center opened, and then after that, you see every year the operating deficit has decreased. So financials have gotten better every single year at the CMP Center. And then taking a look at the CVB, the Visit Enid Fund, as Aaron had mentioned, $475,000 projected from the hotel tax. Visit Enid also has the store sales, visitor guide sales, and then some carryover from this past year, giving the total revenue. And the expenditures are broken down, as you can see in front of you. But overall, the expenditures are covered by the revenue, and this is the exact same budget, not the way it's distributed, but as far as funding goes from the past couple of years. So there's no increase in funding for this part of the fund. And just some things that I know we've talked about, we've read in the paper, and we've kind of been hitting on over and over again, so we'll do it one more time here. Things that we're going to work on towards the future: hotel and long-term business, with the hotel coming in, some of that long-term conference, convention, sporting event business that we can see. Working to continue to maintain and increase that sponsorship revenue and the client relations, doing 365 events this year. We do have a good base of clients. Our goal is to kind of retain that and add to it. We have a great diversity of events, as you can see just from 3 here. We announced Paw Patrol earlier today for the families, or earlier this week for the families, Lone Star amongst some other ones, Comic-Con. So we do a very wide range of events, making it truly the community's facility. And then working on some other initial initiatives as well throughout our fund, and how we can continue to improve the budget. Any questions?
Talk about dirt events.
Yep, so we have adjusted based off of what we've learned over the past handful of years and what is working and what has been more profitable. In the past, we used to do 2 dirt events, one in the fall and one in either the spring or the winter, each of those 2 days. We found that based off of profitability, demand, and just based on wear and tear and manpower that goes into it, we're better off just doing 1 day, 1 event instead of the 4 days. And to be honest with you, it turned out to be much more profitable that way, because we ended up selling out that 1 event, which turns out to be more profitable than doing 4 days of events with all the manpower and stuff that goes in it. So we're kind of moving forward with that philosophy, because I think it's just better overall for our bottom line and also for the facility and our staffing as well.
Are those basically rodeos?
Yep, it's a bull riding event, yes. Now, I will say if there is ever an opportunity where around that one event we currently have, if we can build something in around that event where we don't have to bring dirt in a second time, but can maximize its, already being in the building, we would definitely take advantage of that.
Enid High School is in the process of building a new field house. Is that going to impact us during this next fiscal year? Or?
It will not impact us in the next fiscal year. We already have their basketball schedule set for this upcoming season, so that will not impact us.
And how do you think that's going to impact us in the future? I know there'll be some loss of revenue, I assume.
It could be. There's a couple ways to look at it. I think one, it will, we will lose those dates most likely, although there's a chance that they could use some of those dates for other items. I know in talking to them about it, we probably won't lose all the dates. There are certain events that will still need to be at our facility because they're so big. Two in particular would be Mid-America Wrestling. In the new facility, they won't be able to fit as many mats as they can in our building. We could fit 6 wrestling mats right now, and that tournament has grown from like 18 teams up to 24 teams. So they will have to use our facility, and then they do a Enid High Basketball Classic at the end of December, which is 3 days. That is continuing to grow, and an event that they're looking to use both facilities for so they can bring in that many more teams into Enid to compete. I will say the one thing that we're looking at for the future, near future, and even farther is what other basketball events and winter events that we can do to help make up for some of those dates. We've been meeting with a lot of people as far as basketball tournaments go, basketball events go, looking at wrestling, volleyball, things like that that can help fill some of those dates.
Well, if you have the high school playoffs,
Yes.
teams want to come play before they show up.
Yeah, it's the area
Later in
tournament.
the tournament.
Yeah, and this year we had Class A and Class 2A. I think it's the first year in quite a while, if maybe forever, that we've had the 2 tournaments back-to-back weeks, and that's, it's a pleasure for us to be able to work with the OSSAA. They're great partners of ours. I think they're a big fan of the facility and the way we help them put on tournaments, and because of that, they keep coming back. And, like you mentioned, the teams love playing here. Not just the local teams, but other teams that drove in from an hour and a half away that are staying in town that actually prefer to come here other than places closer to them just because of how great the facility is and the atmosphere of it. So,
Questions, comments?
thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
We are moving on now to the police funds. There are 3 police funds, special projects on page 84, 911 on page 120, and the police fund on page 126. And I understand that O'Rourke has brought some other of his staff members to talk about that. So I'll let Mr. Skaggs come and go over the 2 funds he's going to cover.
We'll ask O'Rourke the hard questions anyway, it's fine.
Oh, that's just wrong. Okay, the first fund I'll talk about tonight is our special projects, or Fund 12. This is kind of a savings fund for us. Special Projects 1 is restitutions we receive from the district court system. Special Projects 2 is state seizures, and Special Projects 3 is federal seizures. We also use these funds for the enforcement of narcotics to assist us with the extra cost in that. I will tell you, out of Special Projects 1 this year, we expect to expend about $20,000. One of our major projects this year is putting body cameras on our officers. So,
Good.
any questions on 12? Before Captain Singleton comes up, I'd go to Fund 51. That's our general fund. And we're kind of excited this year.
What page does that start on, Aaron? 126. Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a little bit out of order since there's 2 of us speaking tonight.
Here we go.
As I started to say, we're kind of excited this year. We're going into the year with a $195,000 deficit. That deficit is usually about 1.3, 1.4 million, and then we manage our expenses, and with changeover in personnel, we bring that down to around 400,000, 500,000. So we're starting at a deficit of 195,000 this year. we fully expect to surpass that, cover that deficit, and add to our fund balance. This has come from quite a bit of discussion with Aaron and Gerald over the past month or so, and looking at a different way to fund your emergency services. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on 51.
Well, tell us what that means. A different way to fund your emergency services.
They, where we were funded 20 and 17% respectively for fire and police, we've looked at reorganizing that where the city is actually funding our operations and capital improvement, and then anything we save above and beyond that will go into the fund balance.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Do you-
Next, I'm sorry.
Talk to me a little bit about the jail contract. Do you think we're getting, I've heard a lot of concern about the jail lately. We have any options? Are we getting our money's
We
worth
have
here?
met a couple times with the Garfield County Jail Board. A lot of those issues are being rectified. We currently pay $108,000 a year for that contract to house our prisoners. And we expect that might go up this year to $110,000, and that's
Okay.
been budgeted into our line item. But that's something they're working on with changeover in personnel. So hopefully that will be rectified. But other than housing our prisoners, we're really not
Okay.
involved in the operations of the jail system.
Sure. We're paying for a big chunk of it. Okay.
If you didn't use the county facilities, you'd have to build it.
No, I know. I'm just, I hear a lot of concerns about the county facilities, and, it's our responsibility to responsibly house the folks that we're in charge of, and that it makes me nervous.
A lot of the issues we've had have been rectified over the past 12 to 18 months
Okay.
in working with the
That might be a
acting
good,
sheriff.
that might be a good study session item one of these days. I would like to know a little bit more about how the jail operations have changed or are changing, and addressing the concerns that make our way. It's, at the moment, we don't exactly have another option, and certainly not at $110,000 a year.
No, sir, we don't.
But I would like to know a little bit more about that at some point, at your convenience.
It's definitely still in flux.
Okay. When things get maybe a little more settled, can you come talk to us about it?
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one. As far as the budget, the 911 calling, is that also a part of?
Captain Singleton's getting ready to speak on that. He'll be able to answer those questions. He's our resident expert. Any other questions? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Captain Singleton. I'm the administrator over Fund 50, which is the 911 fund, and that consists of Enid, Garfield, and Major County. The 911 center also dispatches for police and fire. So the 911 fund is basically a standalone fund that is subsidized by police and fire for the dispatch services. We'll continue to have a projected increase with the additional 25 cents that the state of Oklahoma added to cell phones. We do show a possible deficit of $141,475. We'll try to control that deficit with hiring one less. We have a manning staffing of 20, but we try to stay at 19 so that we can handle our deficit. I generally can come in, even though my deficit is about 141,000, I generally come in pretty close to our projected budget. Any questions?
Yes, sir. My concern is there's many times that you receive calls and they're not really legitimate, but you all still go out because you really don't know. Is there a way to, I don't know, how do we keep people from making those calls and creating that type of cost? Because it's a cost every time in fuel and personnel?
Well, if somebody makes a false 911 call, that's prosecutable by law and by city ordinance. We don't discourage people from making 911 calls for just about anything unless that they make a continuing false 911 calls, then officers can issue citations or arrest on that. What's somebody's emergency may not be another person's emergency. So we try not to discourage that. But we can generally, if somebody's making multiple 911 calls, we can identify that by the subscriber information and those type of things.
Do you get very many?
Pardon me?
Do you get very many?
Yes, we get, well, I can tell you how many abandoned calls we get. As far as false 911 calls, we don't get very many not false 911 calls, but abandoned calls, we get about 2,500 calls a year where somebody calls 911 and then just hangs up. So
But that probably doesn't kill a lot of time or anything.
doesn't. We'll usually still get the phone number. Generally, most of our false 911 calls come from cell phones that are not, don't have subscribers to them. If you have an old phone in the desk drawer and you give it to your kid or grandkid or whatever, they can still call 911 on it. We'll get 40 calls like that in a short period of time where we're trying to track that down, but if they quit calling, we can't find them. But those phones still call 911. The FCC required that about 6 or 7 years ago.
So we're, oh, go ahead, Edward.
I'm fine.
So we're operating major counties well,
Yes,
and at this point, I assume that that's adding more than it costs us to operate.
they add to our budget, our revenue budget, about 140 to 160. Currently, they cost us about $23,000. We're actually fixing to upgrade, which will be on the next agenda, which that will raise a little bit, but in the end, it will lower our amount because we'll go from a 5-year to a 10-year contract with a different provider.
Okay.
Save us about $400,000 to $500,000 over a 10-year period.
So is that, I mean, are there other counties on our radar?
We've been talking to Alfalfa County, but they're still not committed to doing anything at this point.
Hasn't
Grant
that been
County.
going on for 3 or 4 years?
It's been going on for 3 or 4
Yeah.
years. Smaller counties, different politics,
Sure.
so it's a little bit different atmosphere. We've talked to Woods County, but the Woods County and Grant County are together, so there's still some things. We think the state 911 board might move on forcing some other smaller ones to combine. So
Consolidate.
that might be our opportunity to do that.
Okay. I mean, it seems like we have a pretty good operation over here if we can, if we can,
Actually, with the new upgrade of the new system, we won't even have to actually touch a major county call. It will go right through our system straight to them without us having to answer it.
So the other counties still have 911 service,
Yes.
other than major county that we're talking about?
Every county except for a few counties, there's one county in southern Oklahoma, and there was one county over by Tulsa County that up near the border that had no 911 service other than the old FCC stuff. The new state 911 board is trying to address those situations, but it takes some time.
okay.
Do you currently supplement Vance with their 911 call?
Any phone calls that come from Vance, we get, with the exception of the military side. So any of the housing, we get those phone calls, and cell phones, we would get those. A couple years ago, I ran a survey on how many calls we got from Vance in a 6-month period, and we got 1. So we don't get very many from Vance when we do get one.
Is there any plan to expand to the military side as well, as far as just as a supplement?
With the military, there is a lot of encryption, a lot of controls, and they will not interface with the civilian side. We've had problems with radio communications because of that. They're on different frequencies. We've asked them if they would wanted to give us their frequencies, and that is a They have ours, though, so they can talk.
Of course they do.
Any more questions?
Thank you.
Very much.
Joe Jackson's up next to talk about the fire fund, and that's on page 134.
Mayor, Commissioners, Mr. Gilbert. Fund 65 is the fire departments, and I thought I'd just go through the different parts of the budget and compare them to last year. Under personnel services, our personnel costs, by budgeting the same number of people that we did last year, that's 81, and our budget showing a 1% increase in costs there. That's basically on the anticipated compensation after negotiations. And contractual services, I show a 2% increase over last year. The big issue there that raised it was an inspection and repair program for the new PPE we bought this year, our new bunker gear. That'll be an annual cost. I think it's worth it to use a company to clean, inspect, and repair the gear yearly, where we can keep it more like in new for longer. And the maintenance and operations, I'm down about 1%, and the only reason that is I cut some areas where it felt like I had a little bit extra. And overall, with the capital that's budgeted, the budget's up 8% over last year, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the capital items. I'm going to buy 6 more sets of bunker gear or PPE for our staff. Last year when we purchased that, I didn't purchase for staff. I was trying to keep that cost down to a minimum last year, but their gear is just as old as the gear we replaced for the suppression personnel at a cost of $15,000. I have a staff pickup in the budget. That's to replace a 2002 vehicle. Got pretty good use out of that one. We try to replace them in 10 years. At a cost of $35,000. I'm planning on buying a new triple combination pumper at a cost of about $700,000. It'll replace a 28-year-old apparatus that we use in reserve. It's been a good truck, but 28 years later, it's got a lot of wear.
Where is this one stationed?
Our reserve trucks are downtown, and what that means is when we have one in for service or repair, that it goes out on the front line.
So will this replace one of the?
It'll actually go to the front line, and then we'll take one of our older ones and put it in reserve.
Gotcha.
And I guess I might as well mention, this commission or next commission will probably be looking at another big expense for a replacement. I have 2 engines that are 21 years old also that are on the front line. We'll bring one of those in to be our reserve, and we'll put this out.
They may be 21 years old, but they look brand new. You take care of them well.
Your eyesight, keep it like it is.
I see those things.
Okay. Under property improvement, Station 5 on Garland was built in 1982, and believe it or not, I believe it's got the original flooring, cabinets, bathroom fixtures, and such, and it's time to update. We did this previously at Station 3 out on 30th, Randolph. Have a cost of about $25,000. I think we can do the same thing out there. That's pretty well what I'm going to do with the budget. Do you have any questions about anything I'm purchasing or any costs?
That is a very expensive truck.
They are. That's what you think about it, though. $700,000. It lasts 28 years. What'd you pay?
Oh, that's pretty good. If it lasts another 28 years, that's pretty good.
You only like it if it happens to be a fire in your neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Joe.
All right, if there's anything else on the city side, we can address that, and if not, then we're ready to move down the agenda to move on to EMA.
You planning to go to item 4 now?
Yes.
We'll now recess to convene as the Enid Municipal Authority. All trustees of the Enid Municipal Authority special meeting are in attendance except for George. Item 6, the Enid Municipal Authority special meeting is now in session. Item 7, discuss and take necessary action on fiscal year 2018, 2019 Enid Municipal Authority Financial Plan. Aaron?
Yeah, Mayor, Commissioners, we talked about this fund last Thursday. If there's any questions or anything we need to revisit regarding this fund, now would be the time to do that. Okay.
Hearing none. Go ahead. Item 8. Is that where we are, Aaron?
Yes, Mayor.
Adjourn to convene as the Enid Economic Development Authority. All of the trustees of the Enid Economic Development Authority special meeting are in attendance except for George. He is absent. Item 10, the Enid Economic Development Authority special meeting is now in session. Item 11, discuss and take necessary action on the fiscal year 2018, 2019 Enid Economic Development Authority financial plan.
All right, we're going to talk about the Economic Development Authority. That starts on page 177. Overall this year, this fund has a deficit budget of $1.367 million. Last year, you can see we have a balanced budget. There's a couple things that are causing that. We'll get into each of the different areas up here for revenues, operations, and debt services on the following slides. When we get into the revenues and start talking about that, the TIF revenue receipts, you can see have gone up a little over $1 million. There's two things that are causing that to happen. We anticipate getting the final payment for the TIF on the advanced foods bonds in June this year. That payment will not be made until July or August for the final payout to pay off those bonds. And so we have that decrease in revenue for TIF receipts, but we also do have the increase for the TP&L TIF, which we did an appropriation during this year for those for the first time, and it's added to the budget document for this next year. Really just a shot in the dark as to what that might be. They said it depends on what's out there in the laydown yard at the end of the year, so there's a wide variety of what it can be, but with the revenue coming in matching the expenses going out, we just wanted to make sure we had enough appropriation, so we put in $2 million for that project to make sure. This year it was about $1.2 million that we did receive in revenue and payout related to that TIF. So miscellaneous is the same. That is related to rent on the Cafe Garcia building downtown. Interest earnings, this fund really does not have a large fund balance, and interest earnings had been really just budgeted way too high, so we went ahead and adjusted that in this year to make it more in line with where they've been coming in. Reimbursements, that has to do with the HUD loan that is taken out through the Economic Development Authority that's paid through CDBG. Those funds flow through the Economic Development Authority to pay the note that's held by the Economic Development Authority on the NOC campus. We have this year and then one more year after that to pay that off, so then that reimbursement won't be flowing here. We have transfers from general fund. Those are sales tax dollars that we're rebating back on some agreements, and so those dollars come over from general fund. And then the transfer from EMA is to supplement the rest of the operations within this fund. Overall, $775,000 increase. The majority of that, of course, is all from the TP&L TIF.
The reimbursements completely pay off in 2019.
August of 2019, or August, yes, 2019, yes.
One more payment
Yeah,
after.
this one that we're talking about right now. Correct. As we move over to the expenditure side of it for the Economic Development Authority, we still have trust fees. There's two loans there that we have trust fees on for the 2015 incentive agreement with Academy Sports, and then the TIF for the advanced food. So this will be the last year that we have those trust fees. So in the next year, that will be reduced. Professional services are decrease. It has to do with the retail attractions contract that was just approved this last month by commission. There was a reduction in that base pay, but we also did add $100,000 in the budget this year for that line item to do some demolition to the old fire station that's on Cleveland, near Cleveland and Garriott, so that we can get that property ready in case there is any action that the council would like to make regarding that property. So just in anticipation of something there. Sales tax rebates, slight decrease or increase again this year. That has to do with the parking lot guarantee that we have with the downtown hotel, coupled with some decreases in what we've seen in payments out on the rest of that. Economic development went up $5,000. That has to do with the Northwest Water Action Plan, and I'm sure that Brent might share a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. And then TIF payments, of course, increased by the $2 million that we talked about on the TP&L, where the revenue increased. The expenses also increased by that $2 million. So overall, $2.1 million increase in operations for the Economic Development Authority. The incentives that are currently outstanding for EEDA that we're actively paying on, there's a jumbo Save-A-Lot incentive. We have $46,000 outstanding on that. They have until November of 2019 to receive those dollars. Enid Crossings is the development that was at the old Homeland building. It's a $950,000 incentive that doesn't pay off until 28. And then we have Enid Travel Plaza. That one will pay off in October of this year. I have about a year's worth of data I'm waiting on right now from them that I should be getting any time to make out a payment, so I'll draw down that amount there, $52,000, and then we anticipate 30 days following completion of the downtown hotel that will make good on that incentive agreement there for the $200,000 for the one-time payout on that. The debt notes that are outstanding, again, we have the HUD loan, the Academy Sports, and the Advanced Foods, and each of those, the $7,000 decrease is all due to interest on those notes. Any questions on anything with EEDA before I turn it over to Brent Kissling with ERDA to give you an update on their piece of this fund?
Karen, I do have one question. It probably needs to be directed to Mr. Gilbert. Is there any plan to take down that old warehouse building we've got sitting down there in the green space behind the Family Dollar store?
Not currently.
I would like to see it. Are we using that thing?
We're only using it for temporary storage.
It just irritates the life out of me every time I drive by.
We could certainly look at doing that. I had thought we might want to wait to see what happens with the Family Dollar. But if the commission would like us to look at that, we can. We'll need to start with getting some estimates because that's a pretty hefty building. That will cost a lot of money to take it down.
Well, I just thought maybe we could use some of the city equipment, you know, and somebody go down there and shove it over.
Can we like sell tickets
Haul
for
it
it?
off.
Yeah.
Like, can we, take turns?
Maybe that's it. Maybe we could give people a big hammer.
Yeah.
Sledgehammer project.
I don't want the hammer. No,
Knock somebody
hammers
off.
aren't that much fun, but a track hoe.
A track hoe, yeah, would be good, but no, I would like to see that thing come down. To me, it's an eyesore down there, and wouldn't want anything to interfere with the art project.
Is that the building that backs up to the Family Dollar retaining wall?
Sure.
All right.
Part of it, let's see, no, it backs up to an alley.
That's right.
The little garages that used to be there. Chris, could you-
East of the Family Dollar is the garages, and
Okay.
that's the retaining wall.
That's the
for that.
shared retaining wall
Yeah.
that we kind of have to be careful of.
We want to take that and the dollar all at the same time.
think so.
Otherwise, you'd spend a lot of money putting back a retaining wall.
Right, that we
Hold
don't
that
really
earth.
even want there anyway.
But the half-round building is not a part of the Family
Okay.
Dollar.
And those buildings are separate from the building that Commissioner Jansen was talking about. What I can do is, we can probably go out and get a cost estimate, a quote to tear that building down, bring
Okay.
it back to you guys, because I think it'll be a pretty big number. I'm guessing it'll be a six-figure number, but we'll see, because there'll also be the hazmat and the requisite things, but we can look at that process, see what it'll cost, bring it to you, and if you want to do it, we'll figure out a way to amend the budget, won't we, Aaron?
Absolutely.
If I thought we could sell it back to the people we bought it from, I'd be in favor of that.
Not for that price.
Go ahead, Aaron.
All right, well, I'm going to turn it over to Brent. Let him come give you an update on ERDA.
Got ice cream in the car, so.
Thank you, Aaron. Mayor Shuey, council members, City Manager Gilbert, thank you so much for for the honor to serve you as your Economic Development Director and to serve the community. And on behalf of myself and staff, Lisa and Debbie, who do a fantastic job, as well as our great board that I got to spend most of today with, we just thank you for your support for economic development here in Enid. Probably the biggest news item to continue to share, and we need to share over and over as a community, is in the last 5 years we've had almost $2.4 billion worth of construction in this community, which is substantial and way beyond any other county in the state of Oklahoma, beyond Oklahoma County, Texas County, or Tulsa County. Texas County might be close actually, but we've had a lot of investment in this area in the last several years, and those construction workers being here in town has certainly helped during a time whenever oil and gas prices were low. We have successfully, up to this point, diversified our economy to a point where low oil prices and low wheat prices affect us, but don't affect us near as much as what they used to. I have provided, and I hope everybody has, a copy of accomplishments that we're screaming from the mountaintops at Enid Regional Development Alliance this year. A couple of highlights from this. Over the last, since 2009, you've invested just over $5 million in the experiment at the time of the Enid Regional Development Alliance. Whenever we first started, we were on month-to-month contracts trying to figure out whether we wanted to really do this, and I hope you've seen that it's been successful for our community. We've matched that with another 25% that we've received from other sources outside of the community of Enid. And last year we set a record with 60 members, community business members that contributed. This year we broke that record and we have 61 at this point. So we're continuing to increase in the number of local businesses that are involved with the Enid Regional Development Alliance. On the second page, we broke down how that money has been spent over the last several years. We've spent almost $1 million in retail incentives. I will tell you, we were very active with retail incentives early in our existence as an organization. We have not been as active with that in the last several years, mainly because most of those retail projects have been huge, the big ones that you guys have been involved with, much more than what we have on the financial side. We have continued to invest in industrial incentives. The last couple of years, those incentives have been more in the area of utility extensions and partnering, public-private partnership, in order to make a site right for somebody to move in and start hiring people. Where we spend most of our time is on the $2.3 million level. That's where we're spending time and money on business recruitment, trying to bring new folks in, working with our local businesses, providing technical assistance. Most of the work that we do is non-financial when it comes to incentives for somebody. We're trying to help them find a new location or identify capital resources in order to grow. If you do the math, which I did and noticed it just a couple of hours ago, so I wasn't able to change this, the total on this number is about $50,000 different than the total on the other page. Our business recruitment number should have been about $50,000 higher on here, for those of you who are OCD like I am. On project highlights, which are also listed, probably the big event that happened this year was the $32 million ADM milling expansion. You still see the crane that's over the top of the facility. That should be done sometime this fall, and we're hoping to do a big celebration. We're working right now to bring in the CEO of ADM Milling as part of that. If you'll remember, whenever we approved a TIF in order to be competitive with that, because they had 21 mills across the nation that we were competing against, I have ADM Milling on my Google alerts, and I'm seeing some of the announcements of other states where they're no longer having ADM Milling, where they're closing some of their other facilities. So it's exciting to see them investing like they are here when they're not in other areas. We also have the downtown hotel under construction right now. I spoke to Atul Patel this morning, and he's excited about the way that it's progressing. You're going to see it go vertical here over the next 60 days. All of the steel has been purchased. All of the frame has been purchased. The plumber's out there working this week, has about 10 days left, depending on weather. The entire framing process takes about 4 weeks, so it's going to go from flat to vertical very quickly. The Atwoods Distribution Center was completed this year. Wayfinding signage, appreciate the partnership that we have with the City of Enid on that. There's 110 signs planned for the community of Enid. We have 6 up at this point, so we've gotten started, but we still have a long ways to go. You have the Thunder Ranch and Red Dirt Wind Farms at $700 million that was invested in this last year. The Wind Catcher announcement, $4.5 billion. This is the largest project in Oklahoma history, and so we're working to get that across the finish line right now. The Senate Bill 1294, the water bill that we worked on with your lobbyist Kurt Rogo, that was signed into law on May the 3rd and is probably the most significant change to water law in Oklahoma's history and going to greatly affect our ability to use groundwater in the future as a community. Also working with Mike Cooper on the wind and military training routes resolution. That was signed into law this year. Working with Jiffy Trip and Kyle Williams and his team to expand that corner over by Atwoods. And then Transportation Partners and Logistics, they're going through an expansion right now, added a building this year, purchased another 80 acres. They just announced on Tuesday now they are the largest wind components distribution and storage company in the United States. And then for this next year, the investment that you're making, the things that we are looking to do, our priorities for 2018, community residency program is by far our biggest economic development issue. 85% of the physicians that we have in Enid today came to Enid through the residency program. We no longer have a residency program. We're working with St. Mary's Integris every day to try to rebirth that. That is our #1 priority as an organization. Movie theater improvement. By the end of this year, I will have a plan for a new movie theater. I have no idea what it is. I told my board today it may be a projector on the side of the courthouse lawn, but we have been meeting with AMC. We've been meeting with other developers and hoping to have a plan put together on that soon. Soccer complex, you've heard a lot about that. Lahoma Courts, we continue to work very closely with Ricky Hayes on that. Norse, I can answer questions about these if anybody has any, but continuing to enhance our partnership and marketing efforts. We need to, we're actually working to hire somebody part-time to assist with some of these efforts. We partner with a lot of different organizations, and so we've developed a cost share program for them to help offset some of that cost. Our goal over the next 7 years is to take Enid from, in 2010, being a $650 million retail sales community to this past year being an $815 million retail sales community. We believe by 2025 we can be $1 billion retail sales community. In order to do that, we got to bring in people, which include residents and visitors that Marcy Jarrett's working on and Kevin is working on. We have to have more wealth. We have to have landowner payments from oil and gas, from wind, and increased salaries here. And we have to be very aggressive with retail outlets. We've got to have places for people to buy things here locally. Our budget request this year is for $550,000. The extra $5,000 is assistance with the Northwest Water team that was involved in the water bill and some of those things. But that's the spill. Is there any questions that anybody might have?
What's the plan for the new staff person?
It would be about a 20-hour week person that the biggest part of their job would be working with the Northwest Alliance, which is all the economic development directors in Northwest Oklahoma, volunteers from the communities. We do all of that back office work right now. They have outgrown us, and so they'll be paying us a portion of the salary to cover it. They can't afford to hire somebody full-time, and so that's why we're partnering with them. And then we also want to use them for this position to help with some of our marketing pieces and some of our direct marketing that we do with companies. We collect these lists for like companies that work in aerospace that might partner with Vance Air Force Base or partners with Tyson, and having somebody shepherd that marketing effort for us and social media and website. That's the first thing that falls whenever you've got 75 projects that you're trying to track. Updating the website tends to be the last thing you do.
How much money in direct incentives did ERDA give in the last fiscal year?
Ooh, I don't know the answer to that. Are you talking about outlays or encumbered money? Because
New incentives over the last year. I mean, historically, ERDA, and part of how we have funded ERDA, at least as long as I've been here, has been we budget this money for ERDA and understand that part of it will go to staff, and a big chunk of it will be used for direct incentive money, and we have funneled it through ERDA because it's not feasible for this board to be handing out those kind of smaller incentives. And for a couple years, that seemed that we were having those, and we were, having a $50,000 incentive. But it seems in the last couple years, that the only incentives that we're dealing with in this community are the big high dollar ones, the hotels, the retail centers that can't logistically run through ERDA, but we're still putting that money to ERDA. And I'm on the ERDA board, and I only end up making about half the meetings. It's at the same time as one of my monthly dockets, but I go through the financials every month, and I go through the agenda every month, and I'm not seeing these smaller incentives. And if we're not doing smaller incentives through ERDA, do we still need to be devoting this much money of the budget if we only need half that to staff ERDA, and we just need to understand that there may be more incentive opportunities coming through the city of Enid? Why are we not making that move?
Well, and that's a great question. We were very aggressive with incentives whenever we started 8-9 years ago, and there was about $1 million that we had available for incentives whenever we first had those couple of years. We drew down that incentive account all the way down to about $80,000, which would have been about 1.5 years ago was whenever we reached that point. We were pretty intentional this last year of trying to rebuild that incentive account. It's up to around $500,000 today. We would love to get it up closer to $700,000 or $800,000. Today at our board meeting, we discussed projects that go well beyond the budget that we have today. Residency program will be a big part of that. We discussed another project that probably not going to be able to invest in because we have so many other things in the pipeline right now that it would exhaust all of those funds. The smaller projects like that, we can be a little more fleet of foot than what the city can be on those types of incentives and putting a contract together. And
well, and I'm fine. I'm happy to have that as an option if it's being used. But over the last couple of years, I don't really see it being used. And I would rather see an incentive. I would rather not see money sitting in an account at ERDA. I would rather the city use the money for all the many needs we have around, and then if there's a big incentive, there's a great exciting program. If there's some project that needs us to put money up, maybe it makes sense to just bring that to the city council.
Wasn't most of that restricted until this year when you went from 80,000 to over 500,000?
Well, we have about 500,000 that's unrestricted right now. But at the beginning of last year, it was around 180,000. We've had several of our incentive packages that if we approve an incentive, we encumber the entire amount of money of that incentive up front, even though we don't do very many one-year incentives. Most of ours are multi-year. And then we'll have benchmarks in there. And so if they don't reach a benchmark, or if they pay off, or we don't have to extend all of the incentive to them, then our incentive account will replenish. And so that's where we're at right now, is really trying to build that back up. And I would say our board has been very conservative. They've turned down several deals here lately just because they want to be good stewards of those dollars. And once you reach a certain point, then you can do more impactful investments rather than nickel and diamond with 10,000 here or 50,000 there.
Right, I'm looking at your priorities, community residency program dealing with the hospital.
Yes.
What type of impact do you think that would have if you don't get a residency program back in action?
Well, I think if I use the word devastating, that I don't think that's overstating the situation. Healthcare in Enid is our #1 employment sector. And it is the #1 reason why we are the size we are and why we're continuing to grow. We're a town of 50,000 people, but 131,000 people come here to shop. The reason they come here to shop, for the most part, is because they've come to see their physician, or they've come to get medicine or something like healthcare. Really is the core of our Enid economy. And you can't have healthcare if you don't have physicians. And 85% of our physicians that are in Enid today came here through the residency program. We used to have a residency program through OU that was basically headquartered with St. Mary's. That one went away 5-6 years ago. We had a residency program with Integris that was discontinued 2 years ago. And so for the last 2 years, we've had no residents rotating through our community, and completely have lost that opportunity to attract those physicians. And we have an aging physician community right now that many are retiring, and we've got to make sure we have other folks come in. And this is the most complicated project I have worked on since I've been here in this position. It's a lot of moving pieces with the residency program.
Could you, before we approve the budget, whenever we approve it, would you send out your granular budget, the ERDA budget itself? I mean, this budget, we just have the line item, but that breaks it down to, incentives, staff, the like we
Sure.
see with the department budgets.
Yep. We've got it updated just for this morning for the board.
Yeah,
meeting,
and it would be useful for all of us to probably see that again.
Yep, I'll send it to Gerald and you can distribute.
That's okay.
One last question.
Yes, sir.
Residency program. Does that also include private physicians, or is that just physicians that work directly in the hospital, both hospitals?
No, that is all physicians. And you see some ebb and flow right now in our healthcare system. There was a time when all of the doctors worked for a hospital, and then it changed to where most of them were independent, and now you see a lot of them becoming employed again at the hospital. So it's moved back and forth, but that's 85% of the total physicians that we have here in this community came through the residency program.
Are you the only, how can I say it? Trying to think of the right word.
Recruiter?
Yeah, pretty much. Thank you, Mayor. Enticing, able to encourage physicians to come into Enid, or is there anyone else doing that as well? Or is it?
Well, each of the hospitals have a recruitment staff, and they do an analysis every year based on our population and our demographics on what the physician needs should be in Enid. And then they match that up with the physicians that are actually here in the community. And so they figure out where the deficiencies are, and they go out and try to find them. And the best place to find them is with the residents, because it's very difficult to get somebody out of Houston or St. Louis or even Oklahoma City to move to Enid. But once we get them here, and once we get them here for a year or 2 years through a residency program, and they make friends and they understand the culture of our community, we've got them. We can capture them. Otherwise, it's a little tough.
Economically wise for them to make a living, does it have anything to do with it? Do you think they're discouraged because they can make more money somewhere else, or because of the size of the population?
No, I think it's amenities is what they're looking at. I think our paychecks are pretty comparable here. It's places to spend that money is what they're looking at. That's probably a big part of it. Another part of it is with a smaller pool of physicians in the community, the physicians are on call more, so it just allows for less time for, ball games and vacations and that kind of thing.
Erwin, I think the two hospitals recruit continually, as do other businesses in Enid. They recruit every day. It's a big part of their job.
Yep, that's the lifeblood.
But it is hard hiring professionals to come to this town. If you can get them here for a couple years, I mean, we have that, the law firms have the same problem, getting somebody to come to town.
IT's the same way.
Yeah, from Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Wichita. if you can get them here and get them to stay here for a couple of years and buy in, but you know, the number of young lawyers who have come to Enid, been here 6 months and turned around and left, I know doctors, it's the same way, if we can get them here.
That's why amenities like trail systems and places to shop, just the look of the community, the medians, the signage, all of those types of things contribute to workforce development. And yeah, what's good for bringing in a new physician is also good for bringing in a new accountant at Jeffco or a new engineer out at Coke Plant.
One more thing,
Yes, sir.
I'm done with it. As far as the residency, I was told years ago that there was going to be a facility built so that they could, you know, not have to drive so far. They could ride their bikes or walk to like a condo. There's going to be some condominiums built for them to be able to, right out of college or whatever, to be close to their job sites. Is that true, or is that rumor, or?
No, we used to have a couple of physicians that had some houses here in town where they would, I think the term they used was stack up several of the residents in there. One thing you see today that's really changed probably in the last 5 years, is a lot of the residents have families now. It used to be you went through the residency program as a single male or a single female, and just because you just didn't have time for a family. But you see a lot more families nowadays, and so that's not as popular as it used to be here in the community.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brent. Are we ready for number 12?
Yes.
We're now adjourned to convene as the Enid Public Transportation Authority. Item 13, the trustees of the Enid Public Transportation Authority special meeting are all in attendance except for George. Item 14, the Enid Public Transportation Authority special meeting is now in session. Item 15, discuss and take necessary action on the fiscal year 2018-2019 Enid Public Transportation Authority financial plan. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, again, we covered this budget last week. The only proposed changes to this budget are to increase both the revenue and expense $17,000 for the grant revenue increase, and then to cover the match on the buses for $17,000. Is there anything else regarding the transportation budget that we need to discuss tonight?
Hearing none, we'll move on. Item 16, we'll adjourn to convene as the Enid City Commission. Item 17, discuss and take necessary action on the fiscal year 2018-2019 City of Enid budget.
Right, again, I have the slide that I started off the evening with the proposed changes that we're tracking at this point. This is really the opportunity for me to try and capture anything else that you may have that you would like to see as changes for the budget. We'd like to get all that captured, be able to present a clean budget to you with resolutions that match accordingly for approval.
Gerald, I did have one question on an item that I brought up earlier. It is correct that Mr. Rogo's contract is going to be up soon?
Yes, I believe it expires at the end of June.
Okay. So we'll have an opportunity at that time then to discuss our plan for renewal of that.
That renewal typically has been handled by the city manager. It's set at a spending level, $48,000, that is within the threshold.
Well, the one thing I'd like to see considered is, you know, we did make some changes in the retail attractions contract, and I would like to see us. I'd like to see us make a reduction in Mr. Rogo's contract as well. I'm just not satisfied we're getting $48,000 worth of good out of him. I'm not necessarily in favor of terminating it, but I'd like to see us, reduce that contract.
Well, I could certainly reach out to Kurt and visit with him. I know he's getting ready to come and talk to you about what's happened at the legislature, which includes a follow-up on the water bill that he helped get through that's beneficial for the city of Enid.
Well, maybe instead of handling that contract renewal at the city manager level, maybe we need to talk about this one at the commission level. I mean, I know it's within that funding level, but But if there's that concern and we want to talk about scope maybe, I mean, I think there may be some merit in more clearly defining the scope of what we'd like to see him accomplish, perhaps. And we best do that before we sign a new contract rather than after.
Yes.
That's okay.
It was originally set up because it was less than $50,000, and that city manager can handle that.
Well, I mean, I know the city manager can, but, I mean, if there's a concern,
To me, that's the city manager's job. That's my
Yeah, but it's our job to have something to say about how the city's money is spent.
yeah.
And I'm just not satisfied that we're getting our bang for our buck.
I understand that part.
With his contract, is there a list of duties that we require of him to meet every year?
Yes, in fact, what I can do is send you the current copy of his contract so that you can be familiar with it, but it requires coming to meetings a certain number of times and making reports.
Like he's meeting the criteria that we set?
Yes. So how about I start by, we'll give you the contract, and certainly if you would like to discuss it before it gets renewed, we can do that. Certainly, I'll have some conversations with Kurt in advance of that, but if I clearly hear what both of you or all of you or three of you are saying anyway.
Well, I'm not necessarily in favor of hearing him more often, just for the simple reason that, what he comes and does is run down what the legislature is or isn't doing. And we get a lot of that out of the newspaper and off of other media sources. But
Well, I think what we're paying him to do
just
is,
to tell us what they're doing, well, I don't need that. We could eliminate that altogether. I mean, to me, we're paying him to get something done for the city of Enid that we're not going to be able to get done on our own.
well, I think we're paying him to advocate, and if we're paying him to advocate, that's a useful thing, but I want to have a better sense of what the advocacy goals are that this body would like accomplished. And we can define that best by listing in the contract the scope of service. And if what currently is there we're happy with, then maybe we're fine. But I think that I want to review it, and I think it's more appropriate for that scope to be defined by this body and the city manager.
Okay, that's fair enough. Well, again, we'll start by sending you the contract, so you may have seen it before, but
Probably.
you'll see it now and see what the current scope of is. And I will
Maybe a
tell-
real short conversation, but
I will tell you that he does focus on legislation that's important to the city, and I think he sent an update about a week or so ago that I forwarded out to you. So I've heard you, so we will bring it to you we'll talk about it soon, I'm sure.
thank you.
We do have one person signed up to discuss item 17. Diane?
Diane Levesque, 1324 West Oak Avenue, and I do need to rewind on previous budget sessions because prior to this point in time, the public was not permitted to sign up to speak to this, even though it's a hearing, and I'm pleased to know that me or the people who I made a commitment to represent, because I do have more time than my supporters do for this purpose, be able to come up and participate in what is supposed to be a hearing. Now, I'm going to lead off with the matter of Mr. Rogo. It seems to me that in terms of Enid as a county seat and what he has accomplished in terms of advocating for the passage of the water bill and the wind things, with all due respect, Ron Jansen, I've taken your side on Mr. Rogo up until this point, but at this point, Mr. Gilbert, I think he's earned his keep, but I expect him to keep on earning his keep subject to review for the next time around, so I heartily endorse his a renewal of his contract. Okay, main points. I've discussed Main Street Enid becoming self-sufficient, so I'm not sure which one of these funds that Main Street Enid gets city money from, but it is now self-sufficient, and it should be zeroed out entirely in whatever component of this budget that you have here. And take the highest amount of city money that was given to Main Street Enid and use that to figure out how many years you don't have to pay Main Street Enid until the entire total comes up to the amount of $40 million. And the Vance infrastructure aspect of the CAW pipeline is of interest to taxpayers as well, because it's much to their surprise that you guys still run out of money, even though we've passed the sales tax to fund this thing. But it is very much a critical aspect of Vance operations and critical infrastructure. So my supporters would go for a proposal like this. Put as much of the pipeline costs into that critical infrastructure category. Use the savings realized from that to pay down your bonds early, and then sunset that sales tax early. The taxpayers have spoken on that one, at least to my ear. Code Department versus waste, and I'm sure a lot of you have gotten an email from me having to do with waste. When you're looking at discoordination between the Code Department sending out notices and then violation notices about brush being picked up, there being only 7 days, and it takes the Waste Department more than 7 days because one of your trucks is broke down to do that, and who bears that? It's basically getting levied a punishment for not making a phone call. It seems to me a lot cheaper that if brush is in need of being picked up and you still need to bill the homeowner for it, just pick the darn thing up and then just bill the homeowner. You don't need to waste a lot of paper, ink, and staple gun staples and painter's tape and stake material to get it done that way. Now, from previous sessions, the Meadow Lake Golf Course. I want to address Mr. Norwood's point about the footbridge and the safety issues, and safety issues with regards to public parks in general. I agree with Mr. Norwood that there is a safety issue there, but what was not discussed as part of that safety issue is what would a juvenile, preteen, or teen think of when they see a flooded footbridge and say, hey, that looks neat, what could possibly go wrong? Yes, you don't need to presume that everybody's intelligent enough to not take a dare on something, and we already know what happens with the Tide Pod dares these days. All a kid needs is to be dared into doing something, and then you have a tragedy. So that also goes with the RIC-RAC retention proposal for the banks. Mr. Gilbert, I want to bring up a conversation we had about a problem with RIC-RAC over at Government Springs South, having to do with the fact that it fosters poison ivy. Now, it's quite so that you have told me that, you know, as long as the mowers keep it mowed and it stays within the RIC-RAC, it's not a public danger. Well, I'm going to bring up the juveniles with you again, the ones that after a rain like to go hunting crawdads in the creek. I'm sorry, but poison ivy anywhere in any public park is a problem. You do need to spend some money on cleaning that up. And when you're putting riprap down in Meadow Lake, do the same thing and make sure that it doesn't get there. Riprap still requires maintenance, and poison ivy control is certainly a high priority on that one. Let's see. Having to do with the derelict nature of the maintenance. Are you proposing I should have a 5-minute limit? I can always roll this over, but then again, I'm dealing with a backlog.
Be wrapping it up, please.
Okay. I'll make a note of it here and roll it over to next time when you have derelict buildings on public property like the Meadow Lake Maintenance Building. Various and sundry structures and parks that you would hold a residence to a higher standard for. And then, Mr. Gilbert, you made the comment today that it takes a lot to demolish something. Keep that in mind when you're threatening a homeowner with a residence, and it may be his only roof over his head. Yeah, I don't have any sympathy for people who flip houses, sorry, but dealing with that, if you have derelict buildings on public property, you have no standing to complain about derelict property belonging to anybody else, especially if it's a residence. I'll leave it there and continue later.
Thank you. Item 18, we are adjourned.
Thank you for joining us for the Enid City Commission meeting. All meetings are broadcast on local cable channel 12 and in high definition on channel 112. In addition, the council meeting is live streamed on the web at enidtv.org. If you have any questions or comments regarding this broadcast, please visit the City of Enid website at enid.org.